Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The low hum of conversation filled the elegant restaurant in downtown Manhattan. Golden lights reflected off polished wine glasses, and soft jazz murmured in the background. Every plate looked like a piece of art, every guest like they belonged to another world entirely. But Lila Brooks didn't feel like she belonged there at all. Her reflection in the restaurant's glass door caught her eye, the second-hand dress she'd altered herself, the scuffed heels she'd bought from a thrift store, and the nervous way she twisted a strand of hair around her finger. "You can do this," she whispered. "Just one dinner." Her sister Claire had begged her to take her place on this blind date, a setup with some businessman their aunt had arranged. "It's just one night," Claire had said. "Smile, make an excuse, and leave early. I can't go, and Mom will freak if he cancels." So here Lila was, clutching her purse, repeating the table number under her breath like a prayer. Table 12, table 12. Her heart thudded as she scanned the room. Near the back, a man sat alone. Dark suit, tailored to perfection. Broad shoulders, neatly combed hair, eyes fixed on his phone. He looked out of place, too composed, too distant. That must be him, she thought. Taking a shaky breath, she approached. "Hi, you must be Daniel?" she said with an unsure smile. The man looked up, surprised. For a moment he didn't answer. Then something flickered in his gaze, amusement, maybe curiosity. He should have said no, should have told her she had the wrong person. But instead, he nodded slightly. "Yeah," he said, his tone calm but unreadable. "I guess I am." Relief washed over her face. "I'm Lila, Claire's sister." She sat down before her courage could fade. "Blind dates are weird, right? My sister said you might be a little quiet, so I'll probably do all the talking." He almost smiled. "I don't mind that." Lila laughed nervously, fiddling with her napkin. "I'm usually not this talkative, I swear. Well, this place is a little intimidating. I'm used to diners and takeout coffee, not—" She gestured around the room. Whatever this is," he echoed, a small smile finally forming. "I like that." The waiter appeared, setting down 2 glasses of water. Lila took a sip to steady herself. "So what do you do, Daniel?" He hesitated, eyes flicking to her sketchbook peeking out of her purse. "I work in tech," he said casually. "Oh, that's cool. Apps? Software? Something like that." "Wow. I can barely work a microwave." He chuckled softly, watching her, the way her eyes lit up when she talked, how unfiltered her words were. She wasn't trying to impress him. She wasn't calculating her moves. She was just honest, and it caught him off guard. For a moment he forgot she'd mistaken him for someone else. Lila's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced down and froze. A message from Claire read, "He's waiting for you at table 12, don't be late." Her eyes widened. Slowly, she looked up at him, realization dawning. "You're not Daniel, are you?" His expression softened. "No, I'm not." Color drained from her face. "Oh my God." She shot up from her chair, grabbing her purse. "I'm so sorry, I can't believe I—" "Wait," he said, rising too. But she was already heading toward the exit, her cheeks burning. The door swung shut behind her, leaving him standing there, hands in his pockets, a faint trace of regret in his eyes. He didn't even know her last name, but something about her laughter, raw and nervous and real, lingered long after she was gone. That night, the city lights flickered across the rain-slick streets as Lila rode the subway home. Her reflection in the dark window looked like a stranger, flushed cheeks, eyes wide with humiliation. She replayed every second in her head, from the moment she sat down to the text that shattered her illusion. "How could I be so stupid?" she whispered, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Back in her small apartment, her mother was asleep on the couch, a thin blanket covering her frail frame. The hum of the old heater filled the silence. Lila tiptoed to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and sat at the tiny table covered with sketch papers and fabric scraps. She opened her sketchbook and stared at the half-finished drawing of a dress she had been working on for weeks. Her pencil hovered, but she could not bring herself to continue. "You are not leaving tonight," the man's voice echoed in her mind. Not the words he had said, but the look in his eyes, the way he seemed amused, curious, maybe even kind. She shook her head. "Forget him," she muttered. The next morning came too soon. Lila rushed to the café where she worked, her apron still damp from the washer. She smiled at customers, wiped tables, and poured endless cups of coffee. But her mind kept drifting back to the stranger at the restaurant. Around noon, her coworker, Marcy, nudged her with a smirk. "Earth to Lila. You okay? You have been spacing out all morning." Lila forced a laugh. "Just tired." "You sure? You look like someone who just met a movie star and ran away before getting his name." "Something like that," she said quietly, glancing out the window. Across the street, a sleek black car had just pulled up, but she thought nothing of it. At closing time, as she was stacking chairs, the bell above the door jingled. A man stepped inside, tall, calm, in a charcoal coat. Her breath caught. It was him. The stranger from the restaurant, Ethan Ward. He looked different in daylight, still sharp, but less guarded. His gaze found her instantly. "You left in quite a hurry the other night," he said. Lila froze. You came here?" "I did," he said simply. "I was in the neighborhood." That was obviously not true, judging by the luxury car parked outside, but she said nothing. "I wanted to return this," he added, holding up her sketchbook. Lila blinked. "You had that?" "You left it on the table." She reached for it quickly, cheeks warming. "Thank you. I thought I lost it." "You draw," he said, glancing at the sketches. "You are talented." "They are just doodles," she murmured. "No," he said, his tone softening. "They are dreams. Do not call them small." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world outside the cafe window blurred, people rushing home through the drizzle, unaware that time had slowed for the two of them. "I should get going," she said, clutching the book to her chest. "Wait," Ethan said, his voice steady but gentle. "Let me buy you dinner. A real one this time. No mix-ups, no blind dates, just two people who met by accident." Lila hesitated. Every sensible thought screamed no, but something in his eyes, sincere, a little lonely, made her pause. "I cannot," she said finally. "My mom needs me tonight." "Then lunch tomorrow?" She exhaled, half laughing. "You do not give up easily, do you?" "Not when I find something worth a second chance." The words lingered in the air, heavier than either of them expected. Lila tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "We will see," she said softly. Ethan smiled faintly, then turned to leave. The bell chimed as the door closed behind him, and Lila stood there for a long moment, sketchbook pressed to her heart, the faint scent of his cologne still hanging in the air. Outside, the city lights flickered again, like the start of something she did not yet dare to name. The next afternoon, the sun broke through the clouds, turning the city into a patchwork of light and shadow. Lila stood outside the cafe, her apron folded in her bag, debating whether to go home or walk toward the park where she often sketched. She had not texted Ethan back, even though his business card had been tucked between the pages of her sketchbook all night. Every time she opened it, her heart raced a little faster. She told herself it was curiosity, not interest, but deep down she knew that was not true. The memory of his calm voice and steady eyes had followed her through every pour of coffee that morning. She finally sighed and turned toward the small park 2 blocks away. The air smelled faintly of rain and roasted chestnuts from a nearby vendor. She sat on her favorite bench and began to draw, the pencil gliding lightly across the paper. She was halfway through sketching the folds of a gown when a shadow fell over her page. "That one looks beautiful," said a familiar voice. Lila's hand froze. She looked up, startled. Ethan stood there, wearing a navy coat, 2 coffees in hand. "You again?" she said, half amused, half wary. "I told you I do not give up easily," he replied, handing her 1 cup. "Caramel latte, right? I asked your coworker." "You did what?" She laughed, shaking her head. "You are unbelievable. Persistent," he corrected, sitting down beside her. "There is a difference." Lila tried to hide her smile. For a while, they sat in a comfortable silence, watching the late afternoon sunlight dance on the pond. "So, do you work near here?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said vaguely. "I move between offices." "That sounds important," she said, teasing lightly. "You must be one of those mysterious tech guys who live on coffee and secrets." He smiled, but did not correct her. Something like that. She noticed the way he said it, careful, non-committal, but his tone carried warmth, not arrogance. He asked about her drawings, her family, her dreams. She told him about her mother's illness, about how her sister always seemed to have everything figured out. Claire is confident, bold, perfect. I am just me, she said. That sounds like someone who underestimates herself, Ethan said. Maybe, she admitted softly. But life is not exactly waiting for me to catch up. He turned toward her. Then stop waiting. Start building. She looked at him, puzzled. Building what? Whatever you wish existed. The world changes because someone decides to start, not because they are ready. His words lingered like a gentle echo. Lila wanted to ask more, but he stood up suddenly, checking his phone. I have to go, but I meant what I said. You have something special. Do not let fear bury it. She watched him leave, his tall frame disappearing through the park gate, his voice replaying in her head. That night she sat at her kitchen table again, flipping through her sketches. For the first time, she imagined them not as dreams but as possibilities. She stayed up past midnight sewing the first dress prototype, piecing together fabric scraps into something new. The hum of the old sewing machine filled the silence, blending with her heartbeat. Days passed, and Ethan kept his promise of persistence. He stopped by the café, sent her articles about young designers, and once even brought her a book on sustainable fashion. Lila teased him for being too serious, and he teased her for pretending she was not inspired. One evening, as they walked past shop windows lit by golden lights, he paused and looked at her. You are smiling more these days, he said. That is your fault, she replied before realizing how it sounded. He chuckled. Then I will take the blame. Their laughter mingled with the soft hum of the city. Neither of them said it aloud, but something had shifted, a fragile beginning taking root between two worlds that were never meant to meet. And though Lila did not know his full truth yet, she could feel that his kindness was real, and for now, that was enough. The next week arrived with a crisp chill in the air and the promise of something new. Lila's small apartment had become a workshop of half-finished designs, spools of thread, and bursts of color scattered across every surface. Her mother watched from the couch, smiling weakly as Lila worked. You look happy, sweetheart, she said. Lila glanced up from her sewing machine. I am just trying something different. She did not say that the encouragement of a certain man had awakened something she thought she had lost, the belief that maybe she could change her life. A few days later, as she served coffee to the lunch crowd, she heard a familiar voice at the counter. You are always busiest when I stop by, Ethan said, leaning against the counter with a faint grin. Lila laughed softly. Maybe that is because you never check the schedule. Or maybe I just like the chaos, he replied, his eyes glinting with warmth. Are you free this weekend? Depends, she said playfully. Why? There is a small art fair downtown. You mentioned you have never been to one. I cannot afford tickets like that. You can today, he said simply. She hesitated, then nodded. Fine, but only if you let me buy the coffee this time. Saturday came bright and windy. The fair sprawled across several blocks, filled with the scent of roasted almonds and music from street performers. Lila wore one of her own designs, a simple beige dress with stitched floral accents. Ethan noticed immediately. You made this, did you not? She flushed. Maybe. You should be proud, he said. It is stunning. They wandered between stalls, admiring handmade jewelry and paintings. Lila felt lighter than she had in years. When they paused near a display of recycled fabric art, Ethan's phone began to ring. His expression changed, the easy smile fading as he glanced at the caller ID. I need to take this, he said, stepping aside. Lila nodded, pretending to browse, but curiosity got the better of her. His tone shifted the moment he answered, calm, composed, authoritative. Yes, tell the board I will review the proposal before the end of the day. No, the investors will not wait. We finalize tonight. The words hit her like a jolt. The board? Investors? This was not the voice of a man who worked in tech casually. This was someone powerful. Before she could make sense of it, he hung up and turned back, his expression softening. Sorry about that. Work crisis. She forced a smile. You must be important. Just busy, he said. You get used to it. But the thought would not leave her mind. Who exactly was he? Later that evening, as he walked her home, the streetlights painted their shadows across the sidewalk. Thank you for today, she said quietly. It was perfect. It was, he agreed. For a moment, It felt as if the air itself held its breath. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "You know, I never expected to enjoy someone's company like this." Her heart raced. "Neither did I." Their eyes met, the city fading around them. Then her phone buzzed a message from her sister, Claire. "Lila, do not freak out, but the man you met by mistake, his name came up at work. Ethan Ward, CEO of Ward Industries. That is him." Lila stared at the screen, her stomach dropping. CEO. Her mind reeled as she looked up at him, standing there under the streetlight, completely unaware that his secret was out. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes," she lied quickly, shoving the phone into her bag. "Just my sister being my sister," he smiled. "Then ignore her for one more minute." She nodded, forcing herself to breathe normally as he walked her to her door. When he finally said goodnight and disappeared down the street, Lila leaned against the doorframe, her pulse still racing. The truth was out now, at least to her. He had lied, or maybe just hidden the truth. Either way, the world between them had just shifted, and she could already feel the distance forming like glass between two hands that wanted to touch but could not. That night, Lila barely slept. The city outside her window pulsed with light, but all she could see was Ethan's face under the streetlight, the quiet way he had said goodnight, and the truth that now sat heavy in her chest. CEO. The word felt foreign, almost unreal. He had not lied exactly, but he had let her believe something smaller, something safer. She turned over in bed, staring at the ceiling. Was he laughing at her, testing her? Or was he simply tired of being seen only for his wealth? The questions tangled in her mind until dawn. By morning, she made up her mind. She would act normal, pretend she did not know. Maybe she would understand him better before deciding how to feel. When she arrived at the café, a bouquet of white tulips waited on the counter with a small card that read, "For the woman who makes ordinary days beautiful." No signature, but she knew. Her co-workers teased her endlessly, but she only smiled faintly, the secret sitting quietly between her ribs. Days passed, and Ethan continued to show up, sometimes with coffee, sometimes just to sit in the corner and watch her work. Their connection deepened, built on laughter and stories, though the unspoken truth hung between them like invisible glass. One Friday evening he appeared again, dressed casually but still carrying that calm authority that made him stand out anywhere. "Come with me," he said. "I have a surprise." "A surprise? You will like it. Trust me." Against her better judgment, she followed. His car, black, sleek, expensive, waited by the curb. He opened the door for her, and the small gesture made her heart flutter despite her attempts to stay composed. They drove across the city, the skyline glittering like scattered diamonds. When the car stopped, she looked out the window and gasped. It was an art gallery. Inside, lights glowed softly over dozens of displays. "What is this?" she whispered. "A private viewing," he said. "A friend of mine owns this gallery. They are hosting a local artist showcase tonight. I thought you would enjoy it." As they walked through the hall, Lila's eyes caught on every brushstroke, every sculpture. For the first time in a long time, she felt inspired. "You were right," she said. "This is amazing." "You belong in a place like this," he replied. "Not serving coffee, creating." She looked at him, startled. "You barely know me." "I know enough," he said quietly. "You have the kind of fire that changes things." Before she could answer, a voice echoed through the room. "Mr. Ward, I did not expect to see you tonight." Lila turned. A woman in an elegant black dress approached, smiling warmly. "Everyone, please welcome Ethan Ward, our featured donor for the upcoming charity gala." The room erupted in polite applause. Lila's breath caught. So it was true, all of it. Ethan looked momentarily uncomfortable, glancing toward her, but it was too late. The whispers began, soft and curious. "Who is she? His date? She looks ordinary?" The words stung sharper than she expected. She forced a smile, excused herself, and slipped outside into the cold night air. Her hands trembled as she leaned against the marble wall, trying to breathe. A moment later, Ethan followed her out. "Lila, wait. You should have told me," she said, her voice breaking. "I had to find out from a text. Do you have any idea how small that made me feel?" "I wanted to, but every time I tried, you looked at me, like I was just normal. I did not want to lose that." "You already did," she whispered. Silence stretched between them, heavy and raw. "Lila, please." "No," she said, stepping back. "Go be who you are, Ethan Ward. I cannot compete with that world." Then she turned and walked away, the sound of her heels echoing down the empty street, each step marking the space between what had felt like a dream and the truth she could no longer ignore. For days, Ethan tried to reach her, but every message went unanswered. The city that once felt full of color now looked gray through his office window. Meetings blurred together. The hum of success felt hollow without her laughter echoing in his memory. He had built his empire on logic and precision, but nothing in his world had prepared him for the chaos of losing someone who had never cared about his title. Lila, meanwhile, threw herself into work. The café was busier than ever, and she welcomed the exhaustion that kept her mind from wandering. But at night, when she sat at her sewing machine, the ache would return. She would remember his words at the gallery, the way he had looked at her not like a millionaire, but like a man who truly saw her. She told herself it was over, that they came from different worlds, yet every time her phone buzzed, her heart betrayed her. One rainy afternoon, as she cleaned the counter, the door opened and a familiar voice called her name. "Lila." She froze. Ethan stood there, soaked from the rain, holding a small, carefully wrapped box. "You should not be here," she said quietly. "You made that clear," he replied, his tone gentle. "But I needed to see you just once, without the noise of everything else." She hesitated, then nodded toward a corner booth. He sat down, setting the box on the table between them. "What is that?" she asked. "A gift," he said. "Not to buy forgiveness. Just something I should have done earlier." She slowly unwrapped the package and gasped. Inside was her sketchbook, no longer old and frayed, but restored, every page laminated and bound in leather. At the end was a note written in his hand. "Dreams deserve protection. So do the people who create them." Lila's throat tightened. "Ethan, let me finish," he interrupted softly. "I spent years pretending that money was the only language people understood. Then I met you, and you made me realize that honesty and kindness speak louder than any balance sheet. I did not tell you who I was because I wanted to be someone different for once. I wanted to be seen, not measured." She blinked back tears. "But you let me look foolish." "I know," he said, his voice breaking, "and I hate myself for it. But you changed me, Lila. You reminded me that people matter more than power. I want to make it right." She closed the sketchbook slowly. "I do not know if I can trust you again." "Then let me earn it," he said. "Not with gifts, but with actions." The silence that followed was filled only by the sound of rain tapping against the window. Finally she sighed. "You cannot fix everything with a grand gesture." "Maybe not," he said, "but I can start with one." He stood, sliding a business card toward her. "There is a charity gala next week, hosted by the Ward Foundation. They are dedicating it to independent artists and small creators. One of them was supposed to cancel last minute. I told them I know someone better." "You did what?" "You will not just attend," he said, smiling faintly. "You will showcase your designs." Her eyes widened. "Ethan, I cannot—" "You can," he said firmly. "And you should. The world deserves to see what you create." She stared at the card, her hands trembling. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I believe in you," he said simply. "Even if you never forgive me, I want you to have the chance you deserve." Then he turned and walked out into the rain, leaving her staring after him, her reflection wavering in the glass, caught between pride and the fragile possibility of hope. The following days passed in a blur of doubt and determination. Lila stared at the invitation Ethan had left her, reading it over and over again until the words no longer looked real. A charity gala. Her designs on display. The thought terrified her. What if no one liked them? What if people laughed? She had spent her whole life behind the counter, not under the lights. Yet somewhere inside her, a voice whispered that maybe this was her moment. Her mother's health had been improving, and every night she would watch Lila work with quiet pride. "You have to go," her mother said gently one evening as Lila pinned fabric to a mannequin. "Not for him, for you." Lila smiled weakly. "What if I embarrass myself?" "Then you will stand up, smile, and try again. That is what strength looks like." So she said yes. The week flew by in a whirlwind of stitches, fittings, and nerves. She turned her small apartment into a temporary studio, sleeping barely 3 hours a night. The dresses she created were raw, but full of heart, made from recycled fabrics, colored threads, and stories only she could tell. When the night of the gala arrived, Lila almost backed out twice. The taxi ride felt endless, her fingers twisting the hem of her dress. As she stepped out in front of the hotel, camera flashes sparkled like lightning. The entrance shimmered with gold and crystal, and she had never felt smaller. Inside, waiters glided between guests in gowns worth more than her rent for a year. She stood near the doorway, clutching her invitation like a lifeline. "Miss Brooks," a voice called, warm and familiar. Ethan approached, dressed in a classic black tuxedo. For a moment, all she could do was stare. "You came," he said softly. "You invited me," she answered. "I was not sure you would." "Neither was I," she admitted. He offered his arm, and though she hesitated, she took it. As they walked into the main hall, Lila's breath caught. On the stage, a sign read, "The Art of Lila Brooks." The lights focused on a small collection of her dresses displayed on mannequins, each one delicate and alive with color. Guests were already admiring them. "Ethan, what is this?" she whispered. "Your work deserves to be seen," he said simply. "I just made sure it happened." Her chest tightened, emotion swelling in her throat. For a moment, all the whispers and curious glances faded. It was just her and her creations, the proof of her journey, her courage, her hands. Then, from across the room, a sharp voice cut through the hum of admiration. "Well, this is awkward." Lila turned to see Claire, her sister, standing beside two women from their neighborhood, dressed elegantly and smirking. "I did not realize we were celebrating charity cases now," Claire said. The words hit like a slap. Ethan's expression darkened. "Miss Brooks," he said firmly, "is one of the most talented designers I have seen. This event is about creativity, not class." Claire's face paled. "You are defending her?" "I am," he said. "Because she earned her place here." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lila's heart pounded, her cheeks burning, but she did not look away. "Claire," she said quietly, "I am not your embarrassment anymore. I am proud of who I am." For once, her sister had no response. The crowd broke into applause, subtle at first, then growing louder. Ethan turned to her, eyes shining. "You see?" The world noticed. Lila blinked back tears. "I did not do this alone." "No," he said, smiling. "But you believed in yourself, and that made all the difference." For the first time in years, she felt tall, steady, whole. As the night carried on, guests approached her with compliments and questions, and she realized that this was not just Ethan's redemption, it was hers. Somewhere in the blur of music and laughter, she glanced at him across the room, and he smiled at her in that quiet way that said more than words ever could. The distance between their worlds no longer felt impossible. It felt like a bridge they had both begun to build. The night of the gala became a turning point neither of them could have predicted. As the last guests drifted out and the music softened, Lila stood among her dresses, her heart still racing from the applause that had filled the room only moments before. She could hardly believe what had just happened. People had admired her work, taken photos, and even asked where they could buy her designs. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, not as the poor girl serving coffee, but as the woman she had always wanted to become. Ethan approached quietly, his eyes soft with pride. "You did it," he said. She turned toward him, still trembling. "No, we did it. I could not have stood here without you." "You were always meant to stand here," he replied. "I just moved the curtain." She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "You always know what to say." "That is because I finally mean it," he said. Before she could answer, a voice called from behind. "Mr. Ward, the press is requesting an interview about your sponsorship." Ethan sighed. "1 minute," he said, then looked back at her. "Wait for me?" She nodded. As he walked away, Lila turned back to her display, running her fingers over the seams of one of her dresses. The fabric felt alive under her touch, each thread a reminder of late nights, quiet dreams, and every fear she had overcome. She was so lost in the moment that she did not notice a woman standing nearby until she spoke. "You have a gift, my dear," said an older woman with silver hair and a commanding presence. "Your designs are raw, full of emotion. I am Margaret Devlin, curator for the Modern Art Museum's fashion wing. We are always looking for new talent." Lila's breath caught. "You mean me?" "Yes, you," Margaret said with a smile. "I would like to feature your work in our next exhibit. Think about it, but do not take too long. Opportunities like this do not wait." As the woman handed her a card and disappeared into the crowd, Lila stood frozen, the reality washing over her in waves. Her designs, her art could reach beyond tonight. She looked around for Ethan, ready to share the news, but he was still surrounded by reporters. Something about watching him there, poised and powerful, reminded her of the world he came from. Yet tonight, she realized, she was no longer standing beneath it. She was standing beside it. When he finally broke free and returned, she could not help but smile. "What is it?" he asked, noticing the sparkle in her eyes. She handed him the card. "She wants to feature my designs in the Modern Art Museum." He blinked, stunned. "Lila, that is incredible. It feels unreal," she whispered. "I do not even know how to process it." "Then, let me help," he said, laughing softly. "We will celebrate." "Celebrate?" "Yes. There is a quiet rooftop here. No cameras, no crowd, just us." She hesitated, then nodded. Moments later, they stood under the open sky, the city glittering below. The air was cool, the kind that carried away exhaustion and left only calm. Ethan turned to her. "I know tonight was about your art, but I need to say something about us." Her heart skipped. "Ethan, I do not expect forgiveness," he said, "but I want you to know that meeting you changed me. You reminded me that integrity and kindness are not weaknesses. You showed me that love cannot grow behind walls of pride." She looked at him, her eyes soft. "You already had that goodness inside you, Ethan. You just forgot it was there." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe you reminded me." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the city's lights flickering like distant stars. When he reached for her hand, she did not pull away. Their fingers intertwined, tentative but certain. "Whatever comes next," he said quietly, "I want to face it with you." "We will see where life takes us," she said, her voice trembling with warmth. "But thank you for believing in me when I did not believe in myself." He looked at her then, as though she was the only thing in the world worth seeing. And under the vast New York sky, two hearts that once collided by mistake began to align by choice. Months passed, and life began to take on a rhythm that neither Lila nor Ethan had expected. Her collection, The Art of Lila Brooks, became part of the Modern Art Museum's new exhibit, drawing visitors from across the city. Critics described her work as honest, bold, and deeply human. For the first time, her name stood on its own, glowing softly beneath the lights of the gallery. On the night of the grand opening, she stood quietly in the corner, wearing a gown of her own design, simple yet elegant, the same shade of ivory as the sketchbook Ethan had once restored for her. She looked out at the crowd, people taking photos, talking excitedly, and felt something rare and steady bloom inside her. Not nerves this time, peace. Ethan approached from behind, his presence warm and familiar. "So, Miss Brooks," he said softly, "how does it feel to be a celebrated designer?" She smiled without turning. "It feels like a dream I finally let myself believe in." He chuckled. "You earned every bit of it." "We both did," she said, facing him now. "You built a world that could see people like me. That matters." "Maybe," he said, his eyes gentle. "But you built the courage to step into it." She tilted her head, studying him. "You sound like a man who finally stopped running." "I did," he admitted, "because I found someone worth slowing down for." Their eyes met, the noise of the crowd fading into a distant hum. For months, they had rebuilt their connection slowly, deliberately, no grand gestures this time, just honesty and consistency. It was better this way, stronger, because it had been tested. "There is one more surprise tonight," Ethan said, pulling something from his jacket. It was a small, worn sketchbook, the same one she had once filled with dreams and doubts. Except now, its final page was new. Written in his handwriting were the words, "The best mistake we ever made." Beneath it, a small drawing, a ring intertwined with a pencil. Lila looked up, her lips parting in disbelief. Ethan sank to one knee, his voice steady but full of emotion. "Lila Brooks, will you keep creating a future with me? Not as charity, not as chance, but as choice." Tears welled in her eyes. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes." The crowd around them gasped, then erupted in applause as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It was simple, timeless, just like everything about them. Later that night, as the guests drifted away and the museum lights dimmed, they stood together beneath the large glass dome, the city glittering beyond. "You know," she said softly, "if someone had told me that sitting at the wrong table would lead to all this, I would have laughed. Then keep laughing, he said, pulling her close, because sometimes the wrong table is the right destiny. She smiled, resting her head against his shoulder as the city lights danced across the floor. For once, she did not feel like the poor girl pretending to belong. She felt like herself, whole, loved, and seen. And as the night stretched on, Ethan whispered, "This was never about wealth, Lila. It was always about worth." She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "And we found it." He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Together. The final scene closed not on opulence or grandeur, but on a woman and a man who had found something far more valuable: truth, redemption, and a love born from the simplest accident of all. Under the soft glow of the museum lights, they shared one quiet kiss, the world outside unaware that two lives, once divided by class and circumstance, had finally found their balance in each other's arms.